Texas 2036 with some recommendations focused on workforce, which I thought was an interesting, a different take than some of the presentations we've heard.
Well, thank you all. I know I stand between you and lunch, so I'll try to move quickly, but I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank the staff at the coordinating board for all they've been doing to support you. And of course, thank you to Governor Abbott for appointing this commission to tackle this important issue. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Texas 2036, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that uses data to try to tackle the state's biggest challenges. And as y'all are convened here today, it is no accident, I think, that y'all have been looking at tons and tons of data from various presenters to attack this challenge that is essential for our state's future. So I'm going to try to take a role here in kind of piecing some of what you've already heard together and hopefully adding a little bit of additional flair. There are some statements made earlier that I thought were very helpful in terms of framing this. There was a professor earlier from UT Health in Houston that talked about the limited supply of qualified applicants. And I know Dean Harden mentioned specifically that our high schools are going to have to work harder. I think that was the exact quote. And what I'm going to do is talk about some things that are already in motion and some things that can be bolstered to make our high schools and our community colleges a better part of this system, optimizing things that are already in motion at times because of some great actions by the legislature over the last 5 years. But obviously, there's still room for improvement. So let's level set some data. One of the things that Texas rightly brags about is our 90% high school graduation rate is excellent. It is consistently among the top of the nation. But buried underneath that is some challenges and some opportunity. So within that, we have about 76% of our high school graduates that we are calling college, career, or military ready. And I will be blunt, many of the indicators we use to denote that you are college or career ready are not particularly rigorous. And we see that evidenced in part by the fact that only 36% of our high school graduates are going on to receive any sort of post-secondary degree or career credential within 6 years of graduating from high school. So room for improvement. The good news is improvement is happening in Texas public schools right now. When we look at the number of associate's degrees, the number of level 1 or 2 career certificates or IBCs, these are the industry-based certificates that you heard Monica from TEA talking a lot about earlier. They are going up. They're going up even as the state is working to make them more rigorous, more career aligned, better. So you're not getting those Microsoft Word credentials in here. It's like real stuff that has a career value. That is about a third of high school graduates in Texas are now getting those in 2023, which is a dramatic upturn. I will note that about 12% of them are in health science pathways. So, trending up, but a small piece of the pie right now. One other area of real opportunity that our state has been investing in are these college and career-ready high school models. Particularly, I'll highlight the kind of light blue, which is a P-TECH model that y'all may be familiar with. These are the most. This is the best of the best in terms of focusing on both college and career readiness in our high schools. And they are growing. They have been a commitment from the legislature for the last decade. But it is, again, they're not everywhere and not every student has access to the same level of career education in their current systems. So last session, y'all are probably aware that the legislature passed House Bill 8, which completely overhauled community college finance to move to an outcomes-based model that's oriented around the attainment of credentials of value. Now, one of the things that's really exciting about HB8 is how it interrelates with a previous bill that was passed by the legislature in 2019, House Bill 3, which completely overhauled how public school financing is. When these two bills operate together, they have the unique ability to focus on directly incentivizing credential attainment in a high school environment. Now, how does that work? The math gets big. So when we think about what life was like before HB8, 97% of high school students had access to dual credit. 30% of high schools had at least one student earning an associate's degree, but only 3% of students were earning an associate's degree while in high school. With House Bill 3, there were $3,000 to $5,000 outcomes bonuses made available if you complete a credential in high school. There are other ways you can get it, but for this purpose, let's dwell on that. Simultaneously, HB8 makes available 2 bonuses for high school students. You are able to get a bonus for taking 15 hours of dual credit and for completing a credential. So for a student who is in a high school who via dual credit attains a credential of value, the state of Texas is offering a combined $7,500 to $15,000 per student in additional outcomes funding for the same act. It has to be the right act, a valuable act for our workforce and that student. But you, again, if you are, especially these are tiered by student income, they're tiered by high demand fields. The potential here as HB8 is implemented and as these 2 programs are banded together is tremendous. Fortunately, there are high schools across our state that are starting to take advantage of it. These 2 are just quick examples. I know y'all have been talking about expedited pathways into education. Fox Tech in San Antonio will allow you to earn an IBC in, pharmacy, phlebotomy, et cetera, at no cost. It also has available 6-year programs, similar to what you heard some of the individuals talk about earlier. The HEAL School in Houston and Aldine ISD is a great example of a partnership with Memorial Hermann, again, getting that employer side engagement in. It's brand new. But again, this idea of how can we have a 5-year program that starts getting students on these pathways in an expedited way, leveraging all these funding sources in a sustainable long-term way. Now, you might say, San Antonio, Houston, they're big. The good news is there are options available for rural Texas as well in this. Last session, the legislature passed what was called the Rural Pathways Excellent Partnership, or RPEP. It's modeled after a program that was launched in Brooks County to basically allow a whole bunch of small rural school districts to specialize their high schools and then allow students to pick which one they wanted to go to, even if it was in another school district. The legislature last session has allowed for that to scale to a certain extent. There are some caps on it we'll address in a moment. But what you see in these environments is the ability for rural Texas to start to compete in terms of program differentiation and course offerings with its more urban and suburban counterparts, which is huge as we think about meeting health supply area challenges. I know there's a staffing problem, plus the some of the economies of scale when you're dealing with rural Texas. Now, one thing that I'll say as a baseline, as an organization that loves data, is we do need to be cognizant on a lot of what we work on and tailoring programs to meet long-term workforce needs, that there are some data limitations that Texas faces, and that a continued investment in the tri-agency data infrastructure, that's the TEA, the Workforce Commission, the Coordinating Board, is important. Because as we try to do things like solve for rural Texas, it is helpful to know where an employee actually works. And in our current data systems, if your business is headquartered out of Dallas and you work in Texarkana, they will think you work in Dallas, and it is really hard to help meet these regional solutions and regional needs when our own state data systems can at times give us inaccurate snapshots. So looking beyond into some concrete recommendations for how we can scale some of these models. One, PTECs are fantastic. One of the things we hear from practitioners in the field is that the per student allocation is not sufficient to meet up with the added cost that comes with that rigor. We can also talk about startup grants. I know earlier you heard, I believe it was Dusty Moore talking about JET grants and the startup costs of some of these programs. You know, it's hundreds of thousands at times to get a good program started up. You scale that out to millions because we got 2,000 school districts, but there are a lot of opportunities here that at a by state standards small investment, we can have a large impact on the future. We can lift the cap on the number of RPEP programs. We can improve our state data infrastructure, and we can add some of those financial incentives specifically targeted towards high demand fields in the medical sector as it makes sense to, again, overcome some of those barriers to entry on the pipeline. The most important thing I would say, though, is the importance of having, in addition to smart incentives, big goals, right? Like we as a state can have big goals, and there is no reason we as a state cannot say every student in a Texas public high school should have access to a career-aligned credential of value by 2030 or 2032 or wherever it might be, and then work back from there. What are the investments we need to make? And what portion of that should be healthcare? What portion of that should be welding? What portion of that should be other high demand fields that are important for our state? When we then think about how we align our incentive schemes underneath that, it's important for us to take seriously the fact that our A through F system today, which has been subject to lawsuit and thus not fully in place, is can be made more rigorous if we want to achieve those goals. And when I say more rigorous, there's a problem in our A through F system that you are awarded the same amount of high school points for one dual credit course as you are for an associate's degree. So if you're trying to actually solve for a pipeline issue using our high schools and you want more students to be emerging from our high schools ready for the jobs of the future, we need to reward the high schools for doing the hard stuff more than for doing the easy stuff. And that is a difficult legislative conversation to have in the current political environment, but it is important essentially that we, again, align our expectations and our accountability with what we actually desire for our students and their future and our workforce. I know I've talked a little bit about high school here. I do want to note that the challenges that we face in Texas public schools do not start in high school. We have work that we need to do throughout the entire K-12 system, and the legislature has been making some key investments on this in recent years, but we are dealing with, much like the rest of the nation, some significant declines, particularly in math and science scores in recent years. There are policy options available here that may be outside of the scope of this organization, but in terms of investing in math academies and other math interventions, there's a lot of data showing up that's saying just having kids in school a little bit longer, an additional days of the school year program that was started in House Bill 3 in 2019, really seems to be closing the gap in terms of math readiness. So again, if you were to expand that program to include middle school, your odds of having better prepared high school students and then better prepared applicants after high school will improve as well. So we need to, this problem ain't going away anytime soon. So let's address all phases of the pipeline. It's been mentioned earlier that there are a lot of opportunities in terms of the stackability and apprenticeship models that are out there. There are models that are being used in other industries, like the teacher pipelines and the teacher apprenticeship programs that allow you to basically take an expedited course and then earn while you are learning. That type of model where you're able to, do 2 years of college before you're able to start having a structured mechanism is certainly worth evaluating and scaling. And then last but not least, I want to reiterate some concepts that were talked about earlier in terms of both competency-based learning and expedited pathways. There's a lot of really good, exciting work happening in terms of the micro-credential and short-term credential opportunities that can be those stepping stones into those future jobs. And when we think about high school and we think about other opportunities to leverage the community college infrastructure, the more you're able to think about, like, what can we do during a senior year? What can we do in 6 months, 12 months to help get a person find their career footing? Those types of investments can have long-term benefits for the state. So that's all I got. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the panel? Thanks, John.